Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Saudara Chia, mewakili ISI, rakan saya Datuk Seri Hanif Ahman yang telah melontarkan satu gagasan untuk masa depan negara yang sangat menarik. Tuan-tuan yang terutama, duta-duta, tetamu yang saya muliakan. I must commend ISI for convening this conference, very critical at this juncture, at the period when Parliament is suspended, and we have a rather vibrant, healthy discourse on the state of democracy and the future for this country. This is not unique, because the debate must continue, even in a more mature democracy, as one assumes, in the United States of America. The issue of legitimacy, democratic accountability continue to become rather contentious, as you have observed in the last elections, presidential elections in the United States of America. But in Malaysia, it is more relevant and pertinent, precisely because it is not only the issue of fragility of democracy, but in the last few months, you have seen that the whole idea and principle of democracy have been somewhat subverted. The essential and fundamental question as regard to democracy is the issue of legitimacy and democratic accountability, to use Francis Fukuyama's phrase. Legitimacy is to ensure that you are either democratically elected or you represent the aspirations of the majority. There's a very fundamental principle that the present administration cannot stand. And in the light of the recent UMNO General Assembly, it only proves that the present administration is clearly not defensible and legitimate. Now, the second fundamental issue that I must address is the issue of democratic accountability. Politicians generally talk about democracy. Civil society seems to be supportive of that idea. Fine. But the essence is to question, number one, whether you are truly representing the majority, not only in terms of numbers, but the true aspirations of the people. Secondly, the issue of governance. The failure of many democracies, I'm not, of course, comparing to autocracies, but the so-called democracies, because of poor governance, the lack of coherence in terms of their policies, rampant corruption and general decadence, which has been tolerated and continue to be tolerated. I'm not here to defend any administration. The past, Barisan Nasional or Pakatan Harapan or Perikatan Nasional. I think what is important when you refer to the issue of democratic accountability is to ensure that the issues of governance, of democracy, of strong anti-corruption drive, which is becoming so systemic in this country, which is shameful if academics, elites seem to ignore. We ignore this to our own peril. People crave for power, not to serve, but to amass wealth. And in order to be effective, even if it needs to be deemed to be undemocratic, suspend parliament, oppress the majority or the minority, regardless, as long as they can amass as much wealth when they are in power. And this is, to my mind, an issue which must be fairly, frankly, openly debated. I am reminded of, and I think need to state here, Thoreau's very perceptive analysis of the situation. Let me quote. Let us settle ourselves and work and wedge out, feet downward, through the mud and slush of opinion and prejudice and tradition and delusion and appearance, through church and state, through poetry and philosophy and religion, till we come to a hard bottom and rocks in place, which we can call reality. Dr. Anifah made reference to the multiracial, multireligious entity, and more complex than that, to the regional sentiments and aspirations, which we can't claim to be easily resolved by mere pronouncements. It has to be then worked out through series of negotiations, extreme patience, tolerance, which is important. When a country calls itself democratic and a segment of its population, either region or racial minority, religious minority, or the vast number among the majority that is somewhat marginalized. I normally take an issue with those who only talk about the problems of minorities in Malaysia, ignoring the fact that marginalized societies are not only minorities, but the poor in our midst. It is indefensible for a country rich with resources, vibrant in its economy, to tolerate the plight of the poor, urban poor, rural poor, and the poor in the rural hinterland, which I will, of course, allude to further in my discussions. So the participants of this conference must not only refer to the issue of betrayal in terms of the recent formation of this government, but also to look the present stark realities that affect the majority of our people. The discourse is different. That's why we in Keadilan, when we talk about the poor, we don't talk about Malay poor. We talk about poverty. And poverty in our midst refers to the majority of the Malays and Bumiputras, but also a very important segment of the Indian community, the indigenous tribes in Sabah and Sarawak, and pockets of poverty among the Chinese in the midst of plenty. So it transcends racial considerations. Although the end result would invariably assist the Malays and the Bumiputras. But you cannot ignore, in the name of poverty eradication, any segment of our population. Now, so when we talk about democratic accountability, we are talking about the general decadence of our political infrastructure. I made an earlier reference to the United States of America, but people are more confident because the institutions of governance are in place. You talk about judicial independence, a free media, a strong, independent anti-corruption commission, and mechanisms in place to deal with the frustrations of any segment of the community. This is therefore our major challenge in this country. If we call for change, it must entail fundamental reforms in our institutions. That's the only guarantee, not replacing with parties or personalities. That is why we have seen, for example, in the past, whether it's Barisan Nasional or Pakatan Harapan, though there were attempts, undeniably, to affect these changes, but with the lack of effective democratic infrastructure, we have seen some institutions being questioned. Incidentally, I went to see the Anti-Corruption Commission last week, which is quite rare in this country because normally you are summoned to the Anti-Corruption Commission. But I took the liberty to go and see them to express some of my concerns. We want this to be independent. And of course, I would not be effective if I were to go there and defend the administration of the past PH government, because the allegation was that the anti-corruption drive seems to be focused only on one party or one team of leaders on one issue, one MDB, and the related issues. And you actually tend to ignore the growing corruption in the midst. And this is, I think, a fundamental flaw. And that is that the Corruption Commission, Anti-Corruption Commission, is tied to the powers that be. Similar thing should be said about the media or the judiciary and the other related agencies, enforcement agencies. Now, what's disconcerting in this country is that other than issue of corruption, issue of democracy, suspension of parliament, is of course some of the recent statements or remarks by the Inspector General of Police, for example. I was only worried about cartels in our political party because we relate to the role of the cartel betraying the principles and ideals of our struggle. The IGP made reference to the issue of cartel in the police. Issue of abuse of power, corruption, and it has not been taken seriously. There's no response from Minister of Home Affairs. The Prime Minister seems to be completely silent or oblivious to these statements. You can see whatever you like. There's no discussion, no debate, no question from the media. And this is, of course, not only disconcerting, but it reflects the state of decadence that we face in this country. A responsible government would immediately respond and say full investigations, and those responsible must be taken into account. But this does not seem to happen. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have alluded to the issue of poverty and inequality. I believe the inequality continues to plague this country. The World Bank says that the social assistance program in Malaysia deserve credit for their breadth welfare programs reach a large segment of the needy population. But the depth of this assistance remain shallow. Now, previous governments and administrations have given a statistical sleight of hand to make it appear somehow very effective. I've said in Parliament numerous times, to the credit of previous governments, be it BN or PN, that the allocation and resources to help the poor in terms of poverty eradication campaign and to reduce the gap, the inequality, in terms of amount disbursed, is quite impressive. It comes about 52 billion ringgit per year. But the amount of leakages is also worrying. This is not my concern, my statement. This is from the Accountant General's annual report, which comes to the billions. Every segment of our community is targeted and supported. Fishermen, farmers, workers, every segment. But in every area, there's been huge leakages, including assistance to schools. But very little has been done to change or to improve the effort being taken or by the previous administrations. And true enough, the present administration has only helped to exacerbate the crisis because of the failure of governance and the focus purely on political survival and not in terms of effective assistance to the public or the people. Of course, in the past, we have this horrendous, enormous error in terms of computing the state of poverty. But that has been somewhat corrected, although I believe for Kuala Lumpur to survive, for a family to survive with 2,200 ringgit is not feasible. This needs to be increased. But why I tend to reiterate this point of poverty and inequality, because I think it is more than the political turmoil. Inequality or persistent inequality is a ticking time bomb. No democracy can be considered to be stable, vibrant, and will remain not only fragile, but dangerous if we continue to ignore the plight of the majority. And this majority from all races. In our reconfiguration of political process, in the light of the present political turmoil, this principle cannot be compromised. The issue of good governance, the issue of democratic accountability, and tackling the root problem of poverty and inequality, regardless or irrespective of race. I would like to quote B.R. Ambedkar, one of a very known, pronounced Indian leader representing the underclass, the Dalits. In his last speech to the Constituent Assembly, drafting independent India's new constitution in 1949, B.R. Ambedkar, then under Jawaharlal Nehru, he was the Minister of Law and Justice. But he cautioned us about the fate of Indian democracy in the light of India's vast underclass. They call it the Harijans, but he popularized the term Dalits. Quote, "It is quite possible for this newborn democracy to retain its form but give place to dictatorship. Political democracy cannot last unless there lies at the base of it social democracy." He popularized the term social democracy, which covers my fundamental principle of democratic accountability. Because you're accountable to the majority, and the majority, not in terms of your vote in the elections or the numbers you have in parliament, but the true aspirations of the majority of our people. What is disconcerting in Malaysia is the fact that the pattern of democracy, whose trajectory mimics that of countries where democracy has been slowly strangled to death. It's not a coup d'etat, it's a more sophisticated manner. Fair government change, but democracy is strangled. But I'm like Anifah, we remain optimists. I consider myself an incorrigible optimist because in our elections, which is generally impressive as compared to most countries in the world, or most democracies in the world, the level of participation exceed 75%. In some constituencies, 80% or more. So the need for conscientization to create this awareness, to quote Ivan Illich, is essential. That is the critical mass, and that the discourse should not be confined to elites in this hall, but organizations like ISI must start going to districts and talk essentially about rights and responsibilities of citizens. When Alexis Tocqueville refers to democracy in America in the early period, why it was deemed to be successful is precisely because there is general concern, the habits of the heart. He used the term habits of the heart, that generally people tend to feel that you must have democracy, you must value freedom, that after the War of Independence, you want to be truly independent, not from the British Crown, but to reflect and exercise your rights as citizens of this new country. It requires the habits of the heart. But it transcends, it's not confined to the urban elites in their discourse, because sometimes their demands does not necessarily commensurate the interests of the poor. I see in many of our debates, in discussions among the urban elites, it's more about this sophisticated conceptual framework that would render democracy more effective, but hardly any discourse or effective criticism on the implementation of policy directions elevating the position of poverty, the rights of the rural poor, the standard of education, or public health. As you look at the vaccination program in this country, for example, hardly any pronounced debate on whether vaccines should be made available as fast as possible, not only to the VIPs and the frontliners, but the general population, and more so the urban poor and the rural poor and the rural heartland. So it's a major challenge to you, my dear Chia, to start having this change, that this all these strategic institutes and research institutes should not confine these debates to the select community, because, pardon my saying so, it has not been that successful in terms of the democratic accountability. Because until and unless the general population comprehends this, then the racist and the religious bigots will then take over the narrative. And we will be then complaining here and expressing our frustrations here, but we have done virtually nothing effective to ensure that the vast members of the population among the urban poor and the rural folks appreciate the values and the need to inculcate that habits of the heart to ensure that democracy is deemed to be effective. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to conclude by seeking your indulgence to consider the following, which relates to the issue of inequality and poverty that I addressed earlier. Just a short while ago, the World Bank suggested a possible scenario in which Malaysia reaches high income status as soon as to 2024. In its calculation, there is a mere $1.335 gap between current GNI per capita and the threshold for being high income. I've never been overtly obsessed with GDPs, even when I was finance minister, because GDP targets is quite constrained and limited in understanding. The real conditions for most Malaysians today are absolutely problematic. The high income status is a meaningless concept for them. 75% of Malaysians are unable to muster 1,000 ringgit for an emergency. I repeat, 75% of Malaysians are unable to muster 1,000 ringgit for an emergency. The majority of Malaysians will run out of cash within 1 week if they lose access to their income. Meaning, the majority of Malaysians have less than 1 month of available cash reserve in case of a loss of employment. And now the unemployment rate has gone to about close to 800,000 and close to 16% among youth. 16% unemployment among youth. That's why they are resisting this Undi 18. You can't suggest that they are not ready. If you are truly incompetent, whether the election commission and the government, they have to go. I mean, you take 1 year to decide. You have decided this more than a year ago, 1.5 years ago. And now, after 1.5 years, we say we are not ready. Sheer incompetence and dereliction of duty. The majority of Malaysians aged 20 to 29 are earning an average median salary of under 2,000 ringgit per month. The income gap between Bumiputras and Chinese has more than doubled in 10 years. In 2009, the Bumi Chinese gap was only 1,387 ringgit, but now the gap has increased to 2,802 ringgit. The gap between Bumiputras and Indians have also widened recently. In 2009, the gap was only 375 ringgit, but now has increased to 1,123 ringgit. So it is really disconcerting, worrying among the Indians, then the Bumiputras and the Chinese. Now, why do I choose to say this? Because at times when we talk about multiracial agenda, we tend to forget that the Malay-based parties will use these figures because you don't address them. That is why I say, to alleviate this problem, to deal with this issue, we have then to make it clear and pronounce. Malay, Chinese, or Indians, or Sabahans, or Sarawakians, particularly the elites, business community, to say that we must address with the issue of poverty, irrespective of race. Because otherwise, the rest will then choose this narrative, and it is really appealing. I would use it to say that's why we need to move on from the new economic policy, because it has failed. It has also failed the Bumiputras. But then we must then introduce a new economic agenda or Malaysian economic agenda that can appeal to the vast majority of our people, Bumiputras and non-Bumiputras, and to showcase a policy that transcends race. There will be some form of gap, acceptable, but this atrocious difference cannot be defended. How do you suggest to, the Indian leaders to ignore this problem because they are in such a despair because the gap is astounding. Now, 77% of all households earning below 2,000 ringgit are Bumiputras. 77% of all households earning below 2,000 ringgit are Bumiputras. Okay, of course, my retort to this will be easy. Yet, you have a Malay government talking about Malay supremacy, which effectively, sir, means their supremacy, their wealth, and their power, not the vast majority of the Malays. So the discourse has to change. Excellencies, I'm not angry. I'm just stressing a point. Now let me really conclude because this issue is very close to my heart. In any forum, in any discourse, democracy or economy or philosophy or religion, I will have to stress this point, that no democracy can be sustainable. No religious discourse is meaningful without showing concern and compassion to the vast majority of our people, of all ethnic race or religious denominations. That is why I chose, again, to highlight the point raised by Ambedkar, the brilliant Dalit leader, one of the most astounding, although not much known in this country, unfortunately, even among the Indians, about the need for social reform, social democracy to effect change, to ensure that democracy works. Jadi, terima kasih Saudara Chia, Saudara Nifah dan saudara-saudara kerana sabar mendengar pandangan saya. Mudah-mudahan wacana pada hari ini akan dapat membantu membangkitkan kesedaran lebih luas daripada pengertian yang terbatas tentang institusi pemerintahan dalam demokrasi. I'm trying to encourage you to extend the discourse beyond the limited discussions on representative democracy and institutions of governance to the true meaning of habits of the heart and social democracy. Thank you.